Welcome to the Moringa For Life podcast, a show where we celebrate moringa, the miracle tree, the most nutritious plant ever tested, with your hosts here, Jensen Cummings, and the one and only moringa guru, Mariko Gifford. How's it going?
It's great. Just love this. Love it.
Anytime we can get together and talk moringa is a happy day for you. I know that.
Yeah.
All right, we got a lot to cover. We're really going to be starting 2024 celebrating moringa. And I think when you and I think about moringa, food is the first thing that we think of. Obviously, my background as a chef, but it's where you and I started interacting with moringa together 20 something years ago now.
Yeah.
So we're going to take you back on our own personal history. Yeah. Well, this is where you got me to first engage with moringa, was by kind of counting on my culinary prowess, my culinary intrigue to get me into moringa. So we're going to talk about that, our own personal kind of history and journey with moringa food, hashtag moringa food. I'll talk about that more a little bit later. We're going to touch on Moringalicious and Mohana Gill. If you haven't seen our last episode, check out when I got to interview Mohana Gill, the author, Malaysian cookbook author, who created an amazing book called Moringalicious. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll break down the plants a little bit and some of the culinary applications. You can utilize different parts of the plants. And we'll also just talk about some of our personal favorite ways to apply moringa into kind of the culinary world. So that's what you have to look forward to in this episode. Let's take people back now. It was those spice mixtures that I see right there, I think were the first things. Or was it pesto? Fresh pesto? Which one was first?
Pesto was first.
Pesto
So
was basil first. Moringa pesto was the first thing we ever made. Yes. And we're talking circa 2002, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
I had just moved out, was working for uncle's restaurants, starting a culinary school, was something like that. So this was my first recipe development job. Many more to come after that. So we made fresh pesto. So let's start there. You suggested pesto. Did I suggest pesto? How did that even start?
I think you suggested pesto.
Okay.
Because of kind of thinking of the flavors that pesto has and the flavor of moringa and how you could hide the flavor. You're always trying to hide the flavor of moringa. And you thought, okay, we could put a lot of basil and garlic and
and the garlic and the lemon and everything.
Yeah, people know pesto, and then the color is there. It can get mixed in. So there's a lot of compatibility. And also recognition from people about that food. But you made 3 recipes for pesto. One was, the one that we have continued was really our signature product now is with basil, like your standard basil. But then you also made a tamponade and a sun-dried tomato recipe.
Ah, okay. So I took the olive route and the sun-dried tomato. I didn't even remember that.
Yeah, I have those recipes, and I've made those recipes as well. They're just
we got to publish those recipes.
Oh yeah, because that's just more variety, and that's what spurred a lot of this on. Is my customers at the farmers markets wanted more variety. They were taking moringa, and they loved it. But after you've taken it months at a time, and you just want some change to keep your inspiration. And so that's where I start to talk to you about how can I keep people engaged in this food. And that's how it kind of led us down this road. Yeah.
Because at that point you had the capsules, so a little bit more supplements. You had the loose leaf powder, so people were making teas out of it, but it didn't quite have that culinary application where you would have it for a snack, for dinner, for lunch with friends, right? It was still very medicinal at that point, purely medicinal. And we thought that the food integration of it would make it a little bit more adaptation and adoption, and people have more accessibility to it. So I remember that now being kind of
the catalyst. You wanted it to be a household food.
Yes.
You said we just have to get this as a household food. Then you're not just talking to really specific, fringe people who are really looking for this. We're just everyday people, kids, parents, you know, mothers wanting more nutrition for their kids, snacks and still things like that.
Okay. That was a good call even 20 years ago. That's still,
yeah, that was great.
That's still exactly what we want. You mentioned something that I want to touch on for a moment, because this was where our struggle always was, that Moringa is intensely bitter, very earthy, almost a little bit kind of dirty, grimy, like you have pebbles in your mouth a little bit. You know, you love it. Me as a chef, I was like, those aren't those enlightened flavors and notes that I'm looking for. We also have a bad relationship in the United States. Mohana and I touch on this a little bit too, with bitter foods, right? We love salty and sweet so much, but bitter foods, not only they're very, very good for you, and they're very ubiquitous in nature. There's so many really delicious and healthy foods that happen to have that bitterness to it, so we tend to stay away from them. And it's why we have such high incidence of liver and kidney issues, because we don't have those bitter foods that are giving us a lot of the enzymatic reaction, especially in our mouth, to create the initial parts of the gut health, right? A lot of that stuff starts in the mouth. So you always wanted more moringa and more bitterness, and I always wanted less. Do you feel like we landed in a happy place, or do you think I had to concede more or you had to concede more?
You know, I think we've gone back and forth, because I was willing to experiment with how customers were responding. You know, I wanted people to really have that bitter reaction, but you don't have to have so much bitter for the body to respond. Right. So there is a balance there. And some people, when you say really bitter, I find it mildly bitter. So it's very personal, right? It's very individual how much bitter somebody is. It's very similar to matcha tea. If people think that's really bitter, and some people do, then they would think moringa is really bitter. But I find that to be mild. And so I was listening to that, responding to it. And as people started to take moringa, they also became more accustomed to that flavor. And it started to not taste bitter to them anymore. And then they would then jump to the other side. Well, and I would see it happen at my booth, where people were talking, a new person and somebody coming who's, you know, regular customer, and they would taste the tea. I always had a sample of the tea, and they'd say, "Oh wow, that's really bitter." And the regular customer would say, "You know, that's how I responded at first too, but now I don't think it's bitter at all." So there's that
a little bit of an acquired taste, and I think part of that is just maybe the American palate to just kind of blanket statement that. So there was a little bit of give and take there, and I think there was a little bit of people evolving their flavor profile and their palates a little bit. And I think we've moved from that even in the 20 years now. You know, I even joke about things like how popular kale and Brussels sprouts are, which are which are bitter, which are categorically bitter. You know, that whole cabbage family over there is coming from a bitter place. So I think,
and I'd also add too that people have gravitated more toward moringa because they're looking for more nutrition and better health through nutrition. So they're more open to the flavor that these superfoods have, because their priority has changed. It's also now the new customers are not the usual. These are new people who are looking, they're realizing they have health issues. They want to find a natural way through food to deal with that. So I think that's been a big part of the shift as well, is that people are looking for moringa for their health and not just to taste good.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. Show people the pesto. So we also have kind of two different, you have pesto there, right? Somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was then another layer of what we were trying to accomplish was using the fresh flower, which we can see the leaves there, the fresh leaves for the pesto. So it was a very seasonal thing. But we also have, and we will talk about this more and more and more, like not even in this episode, in days, months, years to come, is how to utilize the dried leaf powder, because that'll be making it available year round. And so we've also played around with that. It's similar, for anybody on the culinary side, similar to when you see recipes where they have, let's say, fresh marjoram or fresh oregano or fresh rosemary, and then they have a conversion to the dried. It's usually half as much dried because of the intensity of it. We're probably closer to, I don't know, what do you think, like a third as much maybe, because the dried is so intense, but you have that opportunity as well. So pesto, that is one of the great movers, and we'll make sure we're going to figure out a way to get these variation recipes out to people too, because I didn't even remember that.
We have sent out people on our email list. We've sent the recipe for the dried.
So nice plug for the email list. Get on the email list, everybody, and you will get the recipes. There we go.
And then we have YouTubes of me making the fresh pesto, making some of these things. And so you can go into the YouTube channel, and we have a lot of videos there of me making, the Moringa cooler, different drinks. So that's a big interest of ours. That's why when the Moringalicious book came out, I was like, yes, finally. People can have all these different variations, and she's just done a really beautiful job, and it all looks so mouth-watering, and just So
we're going to show you some pictures of a few of the dishes.
Yay!
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so check out the YouTube Moringa for Life YouTube, because you'll be able to take a little bit further culinary journey there, and then get onto the website moringaforlife.com and make sure and sign up for that newsletter, because when you're in, you get access to recipes. I like that a lot. Okay. Now, the spice mixture. So that came next. Now we wanted kind of a commercial product, something that can be sold, which is, still available today, that product, right? And so we went to that. What were the Italian, Moroccan, Mexican, right? Were those some of the first ones?
Yep. Mexicana, curry, Moroccan, Italiana, and Moringa Gamascio. And then on the back, that was our original. This was in the health food stores. And then on the back was also a recipe. So each one of these, you made a recipe for it. So you made the recipe for the herb blend, and then you made a recipe of how to use the herb blend. And then we've done a lot of different things with those herb blends, because we've made them into oils.
Right.
And so now you have Italiana oil that you can just easily add. So we try to always make things easy for the consumer to just pick it up and use it, right? And a lot of suggestions in different ways. And also a lot of ideas came from customers. They'd come into my booth, or they'd come into my shop here, and they'd say, oh, this is how I use it. And I was like, wow, that's really creative. And then we would try it, and it would be great. So,
and that's what we want from everybody. So I mentioned the hashtag Moringa Food. All right, coming out of this, we're going to be giving you lots more inspiration from our own inspirations, our own history, the things that we've played with in the kitchen when it comes to Moringa. We want to see more of that user-generated content, that good stuff on Instagram, on Facebook, wherever it might be, to let us know what you're using Moringa for in your cooking. So use the hashtag Moringa Food, tag Moringa for Life in your posts, because we want to see what you're cooking with, because like you said, we've been taking a lot of inspiration from our customers, from our community, as well as giving them inspiration as well. So we want to keep growing the opportunity, because sometimes you need that spark of inspiration to say, what am I going to utilize Moringa for? Because sometimes when you dive into this Moringa world, because you're on this healthy path, quite often it's sometimes hard to think about what's just something yummy and delicious and easy and simple, like a pesto, like using the spice mix on your favorite salmon dish, incorporating it into your regular life versus trying to reinvent your life all the time is sometimes more challenging for people. So give us those pictures, videos, whatever it might be, hashtag Moringa Food. We want to see how you're cooking with Moringa. We want to learn and be inspired by you as well. Okay. Anything else with the spice packs? I'm even thinking back, were there some that we discontinued, where like you said with the other original pesto flavors that we had variations? I can't remember.
We did have the 5 spice.
There was a Chinese 5 spice version. Didn't work.
It was, it was early. I had these in the beginning, and the Gamascio is also very specific to people who would understand what Gamascio is, and the 5 spice was like that too. I
didn't have as broad appeal as curry, Italian, Mexican, Moroccan.
Yeah, okay. Even the Moroccan was kind of like, what's Moroccan food?
Right.
You know, so so that was kind of the challenge. And then there were so many ingredients, different ingredients for every one. We had to like simplify. Otherwise, I had, you know, these huge shelves. All it was ingredients for one, right? So
just a pantry to produce these.
Yeah, to put that all together. So it's been amazing because people have been able to utilize them in a really simple way. There is just a small amount of moringa in each one when you just think, oh, I can just shake that on and that's all I need. And so that's where there's been this information or misinformation or misguided information on the internet because people think, oh, I just can just sprinkle a little bit on and that's all I need. And that's really not the case. You really need to have a teaspoon up to a tablespoon. People go 3 tablespoons per day. So that's why we wanted to have it in many, many different ways. So you're eating it throughout the day in a variety of ways rather than sitting down, and making a tea, that's the most common way people take it. Sure. Is as a tea. And so that's how we kind of came upon this, is like, let's spread this out throughout the day so that you're eating it in a multiple different ways. Then you kind of lose track of how much you have eaten by the end of the day. But then you start to experience, this is what we have found with customers' feedback. They don't feel so hungry when it comes down to a meal. They've had the tea a couple of times. They put it in their water bottle and they've had that throughout the day. And so they don't have their eating habit changes because they're being nourished throughout the day, because these little ways that they're taking it is impacting them. So that's been a really good, way.
Making it as multifaceted as possible is part of the plan. That's part of the need to be able to make it more matter of fact in people's daily lives and their routines, because they can have it breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack time, at the gym, wherever it might be. Okay.
Yeah. And so things like the Italiana, they would make salad dressing. That's a really common.
I remember that was number one.
Dressings, it's easy because it's in there the whole time. You just shake it and use it every time you're going to use it. It's preserved because it's in those other, vinegar or citrus or oil, that, whatever that is. And any of the store-bought, that's why I have a couple of things. They're just store-bought hummus and toom, and you just mix the moringa in it, and then you just keep it, salsa, really common, guacamole. You put the Mexicana, it's so good in the guacamole.
Yep.
And then now you just start a habit of just like you put salt and pepper in something, you're putting moringa in it.
Ooh. So when they say season to taste in a recipe, that needs to now also include moringa spice mixtures. Yep, I like it. Yeah. Makes all the sense in the world. Yeah, we were onto something, huh? Yeah. Even back then, thinking about it in this way. Because I remember the Italiana, I was like, you just make an Italian dressing. Like that's maybe not the most chef-inspired thing that I can imagine, or the most healthy thing that you can imagine, but it's something that people will actually eat. And that's the most important thing, to make sure that they get access to the miracle tree, and then their path progresses from there. We need that gateway point for them.
Yeah.
In our sense, is a very healthy thing to have that gateway moment, that gateway food for that. Okay. Love that. What a journey it's been.
There's a moment in time where I realized that I had to let go of how I thought people should take moringa and what healthy was, what it meant for people. I had a customer at the farmer's market, and he would come regularly, and he was I would say somebody we wouldn't normally expect to see at a farmer's market. Older gentleman, just, very almost grumpy. He would just like walk through, never talk to anybody. And I was like, wow, he's like, and he would just come and he would regularly buy the powder. He wouldn't talk. He'd just like shuffle through, get his stuff, So one day I asked him, and I always offered him tea, and he said, oh, I don't even drink water. He was one of those. So I asked him one day, how do you take moringa? And he says, well, I have it as my breakfast every morning. And I said, how? Well, I just mix it in my scotch.
Holy.
And that's how that was breakfast. So I just thought,
wow.
Moringa comes to people wherever they are. They start wherever they are. Yeah, it was great.
That's unbelievable. So somebody who's drinking scotch already likes that peaty, smoky Band-Aid thing. So a little bit of Moringa bitterness and earthiness is no big deal. I don't highly suggest the all scotch diet. Then you hear about those people who have been drinking scotch or a Coors Original and they're 104 years old and you're like, I don't know. Apparently that works for them. But hey,
we don't get to say what's healthy.
You get Moringa, then it's scotch in the morning. I mean, that's more than some people can say. So understood. All right, let's transition here. Talk about Moringalicious, Mohana Gill. I'm going to show you a few pictures of some dishes. Amazing. The book is beautiful. You have the physical book, right? I still don't even have it. I just look at it on my phone to scout through these recipes. So I don't have the hard copy yet. I need to get my copy.
As soon as it was available, I had it. It's beautiful. I mean, the pictures.
Yeah, I'm going to show people some pictures here. I'm going to pop this up on the screen right now for people so you can see a tight up shot of the cover. Those beautiful macaroons there. Mohana Gill, prolific Malaysian, like 9-time, international award winner for her different cookbooks and as an author. So beautiful, beautiful book. Yeah. And the interview I did with her was really great. And you popped in there for a second as well. What she's doing down in Malaysia to really bring Moringa to the forefront, but also Malaysian culture to the forefront. So taking a lot of iconic cultural dishes from Malaysia, Southeast Asia, even into India, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, those cultures where Moringa has been a part of their culture and cuisine for a long time, forgotten, reestablished, forgotten, right? They've had kind of these ebb and flows. And I think now is a moment where you're seeing that. And she talked about Moringa being Malaysia's gift to the world, which I could tell was really meaningful and important to her. And so I want to pop a couple more images just to really captivate you. This nasi malak.
Yeah.
Unbelievably beautiful, like quintessential kind of rice with condiments and accoutrements that you see throughout Southeast Asia with the banana leaf. That was just such a beautiful dish. And I want to show everyone just a quick little clip. I love this because this is something I had actually not done before, and I'm putting this into the repertoire, and it makes all the sense in the world. Something I've done with so many herbs that it's again, just as a chef, as a professional, you still don't always think about it. So here's her talking about making this beautiful, vibrant green version of what you just saw. Check this out.
This is moringa leaf. So what I've done is I've taken the moringa leaf and this is the moringa leaf, right? So we just take the moringa leaf, blanch it in hot water for about 2 minutes, and then make a paste out of it. So you get this beautiful color, this green color. Can you see this green color? Beautiful deep color. Green. Green, yes. So what we do is when you put all your ingredients in your rice, you just add maybe about 1 teaspoon like this of your moringa into your...
Okay, so this is going to be a vibrantly green rice, not just like... Yeah. Beautiful. I like she's in your camp of more moringa. You see that teaspoon? That was like 2 tablespoons. Perfect. Teaspoon, 2 tablespoons. Whatever, you don't necessarily need to mention it.
It's really amazing.
Is really beautiful and really intensely colored. And what's interesting when you do that, because I know I've done that with so many different greens and herbs and things like that, and then a lot of times we're making oils out of it. You saw the leaf, and then you saw the puree from the leaf. The puree is so much more green than the plant itself, right? Because you really, when you blanch it, you really lock in that color so it doesn't kind of gray out and brown out on you a little bit. That was beautiful. I can just imagine how intensely, vibrantly green. I used to do that a lot with like pea and spinach and basil and lemon pureed up for risotto. It's like an iconically green risotto is a thing. Now I'm doing that with with other dishes, especially other rice dishes, straight into the rice cooker, something else I hadn't considered. It's beautiful, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to have the opportunity to actually stay with her. I'm traveling there in the end of March. Actually, right after I leave your house, I go to Malaysia, to Mohana. And we, Dama, one of our students, will meet me there. The three of us will do a live podcast there, cooking with Mohana. And I'm just so excited about it. It's just I look through this book and I keep putting, markers in there. Oh, I'm going to share
this dish and this dish and this dish.
You just have to have the book. It's available on Amazon right now, and we're working on it being available in all different countries. But it's just beautiful, and why it's important is that when you have a cookbook of something, then it is a household thing, because it's a book that you just grab and say, what can I make with moringa in it? And she's had these from a lot of different cultures. And so even if it's not your culture, so many people are experimenting with different cultural foods. You have a recipe with moringa there. So very creative. It helps people just go more into the, cuisine if they want. Or like I said, she says a tablespoon, put 2. So the people who want who want the more of the health benefit, they can just, double up on the recipe.
Yeah, and we are going to put the link to Moringalicious available on Amazon into the comments. So make sure and check that out. Make sure to grab the book. Obviously, a beautiful book, an inspiring book as well. And just the visuals are really great.
Moringalicious.com. And so that's where she'll also
start. Are they starting to build out that website too?
Oh, yeah, that's their website now. And so that'll, it's all new because this just came out. It's really hot off the press. And so that will be a place where it'll be more interactive, and they'll put more information on there. So that's also in the works as far as growing that website.
Okay, let's look at this image real quick too. This was the tour doll with the drumsticks. Ooh. Oh yeah, with so the chilies on top. With that color, anytime you get that kind of deep orange red color of like curry, is a beautiful thing. And then with the drumsticks, so I mentioned. So let's transition into talking about different parts of the plant. Something that Mohana did an amazing job of it kind of being the way that the recipes were organized, right?
Yeah.
So that you had recipes where you could think about the flowers, you could think about the drumsticks, the seed pods. We'll talk about those, and the leaves themselves, which mostly is what I have worked with, is the leaves. So to be able to see the different recipes with the flowers, which a lot of times are more garnishes and things like that, the flowers themselves, but the seed pods, the drumsticks, that was the part where I hadn't really utilized those. And there's a lot of really dynamic recipes on there utilizing that drumstick. She showed us the beautiful, huge drumsticks that she had that were like still fresh and like deep green. They look like giant reeds that you smack somebody with. They were
amazing. That's the right culture. That's right climate. So these are dry.
You have little California ones.
And I went out and I had the fresh ones when we were doing that podcast, and so I had my little ones, and she had her like 3-foot long ones. I mean, unreal. So that's the difference in the climate when you're growing moringa. And a lot of the inspiration that I would like people to have from this is to start to grow their own moringa.
Right.
Because that's the thing, you're getting an ingredient. Sometimes you have to grow it in order to have it. And so a lot of that, how to grow it, is on our YouTube, all the different times of year that people can grow it in their climates. So that's a really big part. But yeah, when you see, and I'll be in India during that same trip, and then in Sri Lanka, and when you see it growing in its, full glory in the right climate, it's stunning. I mean, I love this plant, and I'm used to the color that the season that I have. This is January, right? And it's a miracle that I still have leaf, because normally December, this all falls off. But in those areas, their dry season is their dormant season, if it even goes dormant, right? But that climate is just beautiful. Yeah.
And what I have a lot of moringa envy when you're out there. Yeah, show us the flowers.
Yeah, is the dried flowers. So when they're asking for fresh flower, we use dried. And so usually there's you use half as much of a dried and by weight as fresh. So you can do the conversion, but where would you get dried moringa flowers? That's where it's like the industry.
That's why you have to grow them. They're even hard to cultivate. There's not a lot of them in comparison to the other parts of the plant. Yeah. But and it's so amazing. The drumstick. Let's talk about the drumstick for a minute. The application of it, the utilization of it. So what she was talking about was a lot of times people are taking them, cutting them into, let's say, 1-inch segments just across, and boiling them to break down some of those fibers, maybe husking them slightly, and then sauteing them as if they were, sometimes treating them as if they were meat. Okra, for anybody who knows okra, I felt there was a lot of similarities in almost the construct of it, how you might cut them. They don't have that what is it, mucus? that
blackness or
that gel, that slime that comes out of okra. It's a lot of similarities there, which I noticed just kind of in the makeup of them, how you might treat them. So what's some of your experience utilizing the seed pod? What are some things people need to know about it?
Well, we use it now. We make sambar. I've gotten, every Indian family loves that dish. And so I've learned to make that, all the different seasonings that go in, you saute it. And then that is just so flavorful when it absorbs that, all those flavors. But there is the physical having to pull the fibers. And that's similar to artichoke. When people eat artichoke, you're just used to having to,
comparison.
Yeah, you have to just pull those fibers out, because even as thin as they might be, they still have those fibers, and it takes some work. About 3/4 of an, and let's say 3/8 of an inch thick, or a little bit thicker. It's still going to have that fiber. And so when you cut it in those sizes, and we cut them a little bit bigger, 2.5 inches, you're actually getting on the edge and pulling that off as much as possible. And still you're going to be pulling that out. But it has this texture, and the popping of the seeds that are in there. There is a sensation, just like, oh my God.
You get those squeaky beans?
Oh, it's just, it's so, you have to experience it, and you're pulling that out, and there's this flavor, that it has, that it's not like something else I've ever tried. But the pulling that fiber out is important, because you can't really swallow it.
Okay.
You can
so people just have to be aware. There's a little bit of work that goes into it. It's an edamame pod where you're pulling the seeds out. It's a chicken wing. It's a rib. Right? It's some of those things where eating fish, you might find a pin bone every once in a while. So you just have to be aware of that eating. And sometimes we're so convenient. We don't want to mess with any of those things that, you're going to have to get your hands a little dirty, deal with it. It's worth it. It's worth it.
It's so worth it. And once you get inside, the inside of a seed pod has this, kind of, when it's dried, it just looks like this.
Fur?
It's kind of silvery. It's not fur, but it's spongy.
Spongy. Okay, yeah.
It's spongy, and when you're actually eating that's actually a very similar texture to artichoke.
Gotcha. Mohana did mention specifically that sometimes people will split it and scrape that off. Like you would, almost like a vanilla bean. You'll scrape that off and then chop that up for maybe a little bit simpler of a kind of an eating experience, I guess. So you have that option as well. Mohana mentioned that specifically. Like you said, if you're willing to work a little bit and have that kind of fibrous stringiness like an artichoke, I think that makes a lot of sense to people. All right, the flowers you mentioned as well. Give me an idea of how many flowers are you getting in comparison? Like, what's the amount of flowering on a moringa plant?
Well, we have the challenge of the climate. So when we want those flowers to set early in the season, like May and June, so there's enough time for them to grow enough. And then we'll be eating those seed pods. We don't grow for seed here, because Yeah, because there's so many other places we could get really good quality seed. So we're even what we're growing for food. So we let that flower become the seed pod so we can have a seed pod. But at the end of the season, which is like October, November, we're harvesting all of the flowers at that time and eating those flowers because they're not going to become seed pods. Because they're at the end of the season. There's no time. So that's when we harvest the flower. We dry a lot of the flower, but you can also eat it in a lot of different things. It has a fragrance. It has its own little texture to it.
It's really great in the kind of chopped salad stuff that you do. All the greens, all the herbs, aromatic vegetables and kind of those flowers in there. Then using the Italiana seasoning to make a simple vinaigrette dressing. That's the way that I remember the flowers the most. So seeing all these different recipes that Mohana had in the book, I thought was really great. This one, look at this beautiful picture, utilizing it as part of a pickling brine, which is really great. Incorporate it into the preservation. So, pickling, fermenting obviously is a big, big deal for me. But look at this picture. Here's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, with the lotus root. I mean, come on, the chili peppers there, and then just the garnish of the flowers.
Right. Yeah, they're beautiful, and they're miniature little orchids. They're little clusters.
I was gonna say, they look like orchids.
They look like orchids, but the inside is kind of a pop. And then you can't always have all open flowers. Sometimes you have the bud, and the bud is this little pop of flavor and texture. And it's like there's this little experience there.
Yeah.
One of the best things I ate with that, and your brother made, Mitchell made at one of our courses, he made a cold soup of watermelon tomato, fresh watermelon, fresh
kind
tomato.
Of gazpacho style.
And he floated, the entire top was floated with the fresh flowers. It was stunning. It was those flavors, and then to have that little bit, I mean, it was so creative. That's a memorable food.
Yeah. Of course, Mitchell. That boy makes some beautiful food.
Oh my gosh, it was
shout out to Mitchell Cummings, sushi chef extraordinaire.
Yeah, bright red, and then the white, creamy white, a little bit of yellow on there. It was the work of art. Really.
And then with gazpachos, a lot of times you're finishing that with, say, an extra virgin olive oil. So using, the leaf to make an oil, something like that, to drizzle, so you can layer in those flavors as well. Yeah, beautiful on that. Okay, I want to take a little bit of time as we get towards the end of this. Again, if anything that we've been talking about so far has inspired you, post your pictures, cook your dishes, explore, experiment, get into the kitchen, use the hashtag Moringa Food, tag Moringa for Life. We want to see what you're cooking in your kitchen. We want to be inspired by you. And who knows, we might be showing pictures of your dishes on one of these episodes coming up. We might be featuring one of your recipes on the website, on the back of one of our spice mixtures. We probably have to come up with a specific campaign to do that, right?
Yeah.
At some point, that makes a lot of sense. So some of the things that we like to cook with Moringa, the things that we like to do. One of the ones that has now become kind of a product for you, as I try to get the words out, is the mojos, right? These little truffle balls. Do you have any? Did you make some?
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. And I think I got a picture of it too to close up for people.
I mean, these ones are covered in cacao, just dusted.
Here, I'm gonna pop this up. Ooh, look at these.
Yeah.
I mean, beautiful little truffles with that kind of brown and greenish hue to them. With what, you got some walnuts or
that's all. Yeah, that's crushed walnut.
Those look so good. Okay, so talk about that one, because this happened as part of conversations that we've had too, where talked about kids and how do we get kids, hooked when they're young, like in that flavor profile and eating those foods. We know how problematic feeding kids can be sometimes, so we end up going to the safe foods because we don't want the struggle and the fight. So it's like, how do we get, again, in my mind, less moringa or moringa into the right flavor profile? And you're like, no, I can get more moringa. And that's where mojos came about, where you're like, how do we get the sweet and how do we get some of the salty and the walnuts and some of those flavors that you can imagine that kids really like. A nice chocolate truffle, a nice, sweetness to it. So talk about the kind of origin of the Mojos.
Yeah, but that was also a request from farmers market customers where they were saying, I want to have this in more ways and I want to have more moringa in it. That's how it originated. I think, okay, my original Mojos, one was called the Moringa Mojo, and it had all different Chinese herbs in it. So 3 kinds of ginseng. Yeah, I mean, it was stacked, and it had dates. Yeah, the sweetener was dates. Cacao nibs, and it was coated in cacao, and it was a bomb. I mean, that was like medicinal. And then we made another one that was called Moringa Majesty, and that was with the Chinese herb schizandra powder. It has all 5 flavors, very intense.
Sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami. Is that you're saying? The 5 tastes?
With all, they call it the beauty herb, and it addresses all 5 organ systems in the body. So it had honey, cashew, royal jelly. It was just like this amazing bomb. I mean, they just packed with that. It had also some moringa seed, which adds to that bitterness. It has bitter, pungent, and astringent when you eat the seed. So I just added so much inside of these 2 products, and it wasn't for everyone. It was very intense, but there were certain people, they would come and they could only get there right at the end of the market, and whatever I hadn't sold, they bought it all.
All of them.
So, yeah. So I had these really great customers, and but they were really in that superfood. It was their food. They could just live on those. And so that was the beginning. I was just really looking at how to get that one extreme customer, something really, nutritious, but really on the medicinal side. So they were eating all those Chinese herbs.
Right. It's almost like, I think about it like a hiking granola bar here in Colorado. There's lots of bars like that where somebody can go on a hike, go rock climbing, be able to have something that's intense, and a lot of them are a little bit more intensely flavored than kind of an old school Nature's Oats granola bar. Yeah. Right. And they also have that more soft kind of tacky texture. Dates, right? Pureed dates is a foundation of a lot of those. Cashews, a foundation of those, because they get a little bit of that kind of creaminess, that chewiness, which I think also, again, back to like the kids, they like that texture a lot, right? Yeah. Versus more that gritty, chalky, old school kind of granola bar thing. They like that chewy. It's a little bit more supple and velvety, and all those things that I think really get people excited about it, because there's this like unctuousness to it that I think you don't think of when you're doing moringa tea, right? It's a completely different culinary experience, especially on the mouthfeel. And then the sweetness, I think, is something that really helps counteract it, but not in a processed sugar way, right? Utilizing the dates and the honeys, which are already very good for you, very healthy, very balanced items, that they make it almost candy-like,
Yeah, and when you put texture, so we put cocoa nibs in the Mojos and in the Majesties, so you're actually having to really chew that, eat that, and it changes when you just have something smooth and you taste the moringa in there. You taste more of the moringa. But with the Majesty, I didn't want it to be green, and so instead of the powder, we did crushed leaf. So it also keeps the flavor from going all the way throughout, because if you have powder, it's throughout. But when the crushed leaf, it was just, once you ate, that part, and it had coconut, it had creamed coconut. So it had its own, it had that rich coconut, but it was creamed coconut, and then it was coated in shredded coconut. So it was a white, so it really changed the presentation of the dark, murky green, because it had speckled green. It had just as much by weight, had just as much moringa in it, but
you got those hops instead of this like almost one note of moringa.
Yeah. So little, it didn't say really crunchy, but you could tell there was a texture in there. Yeah, and the schizandra, we have the powder and also crushed berry. It's a berry, so we had that as a texture, which is bitter. I mean, it tastes mostly bitter, and so people having, wow, what are all these textures and flavors? So you get a little confused, and so you're not focusing on.
So you have to take another bite and another bite to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. And by the time you figure it out, you've eaten it, right?
And that's perfect. I'm gonna steal that segue right there, because that look, I'm gonna tell you about that look, the confused look when somebody's eating. Having been a chef for a long time, I've seen all of the emotional responses, especially having cooked in a lot of open kitchens, that people have when they eat food. And you see the people joy pointing at stuff, people going, have you tried this? You know, there's all these emotions that go on, and you start to be able to read them and kind of understand them when they're interacting with your food. And my favorite is the confused, almost upset look. And I'm going to tell you specifically a dish and an experience and how Moringa plays a part in that. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
I have a lot of very like iconic one pot like soups and stews is something that I'm like really love. And gumbo, pulling from some of our French, our Cajun family from Lafayette, Louisiana, gumbo is something that I cook, and it will win awards, guaranteed. And the reason is because I have the commitment to make roux for 30 minutes straight, stirring and stirring and stirring and stirring till it is deep brown like toffee, that there's this nuttiness and this sweetness. But most people don't have the commitment to cook for 30 minutes. And so that's the reason for it. That's my humble brag there. It is that good. This last Christmas Eve was kind of a Christmas Eve dish it's become for us. Mike, brother-in-law, he did the stirring, and he's like, this is no joke. I was like, I told you why this is so good. The reason that he did it this year is because last year was the first year that I had made that gumbo for him. Incidentally, a few times we'd made it before, he had missed it. Mike loves food, travels all over the country, all over the world for his work, had gumbo in New Orleans. We're having gumbo nonchalantly as everyone's eating it, get the normal thumbs up. This is really good. Dan, father-in-law, he never says a word, but he just loves pointing intensely and kind of bopping when he's eating food. You know, he's happy. Mike eats a bowl, nothing. Gets a second bowl, and he's sitting on the stairs. Couldn't even make it back to the table. Sitting on the stairs eating, and I look over and I see him, and he's got this look. He just keeps eating and is just confused and kind of looking around, like needing help to understand what's happening. And finally, he gets done with it and looks up and goes, "This is the best gumbo I have ever had." Almost upset because he's realizing it's like I haven't even lived yet. Like I haven't ever had gumbo before. All of these times I've had gumbo anywhere, everywhere, including New Orleans. And so it's that experience that I absolutely love. And that look of being just confused. I don't know what's happening right now, and I need more, and I need somebody to tell me what is happening right now. And so Moringa, to bring this long story back to Moringa, there is an ingredient, now 2 ingredients that I'm going to utilize Moringa for. Okra is commonly used in gumbos as a vegetable, as a flavor, but as a thickening. That mucus helps thicken it. So gumbo is actually categorized in 3 ways, and 3 ways are the ways that you cook in it. Cook it with a roux, which is a thickening, okra, or filet, gumbo filet, which is sassafras root. And all 3 of those are used for thickening. Sometimes now in the modern age, people use all 3, but generally it's 3 different styles based on the way that you thickened it and the addition in those ingredients. I'm going to definitely use some drumsticks, thinking about okra as a classic item in there. But what I do is I don't use sassafras. I use the moringa in place of the gumbo filet. And I probably need to get powder from you, because I always have the capsules. I literally break apart like a dozen capsules, hand break apart a dozen capsules to have enough seasoning to flavor the pot of gumbo. It's like I'm paying penance for it.
And fresh leaf too inside, and not fresh. This is dried leaf.
Yeah.
in there too, so it gives another texture in there. But that's a lot of
so this past Christmas Eve, as the last few years, I'm breaking apart them. That's how I get my seasoning, is breaking apart capsules, because we always have capsules. You always send capsules, but I don't always have leaf powder. So anyway, that's my now favorite way to incorporate that's kind of new and fun, and it's becoming a little bit of a family tradition, and everybody loves that dish. And I don't even tell them that moringa's in it. They maybe have known, or they've asked me. It's just incorporated into now Mike's favorite dish has moringa in it.
See, and that's perfect. And that's how this mojo came about. My husband Chris didn't care for all of that, the intensity of those original mojos, but so he made up his own version, which was just honey, peanut butter, crunchy peanut butter, nutritional yeast, and the leaf powder.
Okay.
And he would put it in a little Tupperware and he'd bring it to work. That would be lunch, and it would hold him over. I mean, he's physical, in construction, heavy work that he was doing, and that was enough. So that's the recipe actually that we use now to do this mojo. We do all the variations where I can put, spice in this, or creamy or nuts, or coat it with nuts, or all the variations. But that base is more widely felt like normal, like people like, everyday people, because peanut butter, some people can do with cashew butter or others, but this is, so this is now the mojo comes in this form because of the time it takes to make the balls, and it's just in this little wrapped thing, and so it looks much more like it looks like a bar of soap, right?
Oh yeah.
And that way you can just break off some and eat whatever amount, and it's easy, for us to make this much more easy, and it looks like a kind of bar of soap, even the shape of it. But then
you can just like pop off little pieces and chew on it, wrap it back up, save it for later.
Yeah.
So you can make whatever level of commitment that you want for that given time.
Yeah, and that, like backpackers and people who just want it, it's non-perishable practically. There's nothing in there that's going to go bad. It's easy, lightweight. You just take it. It's very nourishing. I mean, 5 people can have that as lunch. And it's this little tiny thing. Now, mostly people want to have, get full. But if you're backpacking, or you're, on some kind of excursion, but you just want to have a snack in the glove compartment all the time, you have that. So it makes it easier, because
we got to send some of that to Betsy, because Betsy's doing a lot more hiking now with the kids, and now she's got some mom meetups, and they're doing some hiking. Be a great group to incorporate that. We talked about kids and moms are a big group that needs to have widespread adoption of this, because of the health aspects needed for kids and for moms, especially postpartum or during pregnancy. So like all that. Okay, take us out. What's one thing that you're cooking right now that you're utilizing moringa in that people need to know about and go, ooh, that sounds good? What's your gumbo? What's your version of something like that where you're just really excited about the way you're cooking with moringa right now?
I put it in soup. For us, it's winter right now. And so any soup that
to clarify for everybody, it's 20 degrees here in Denver. It's what, like 62 degrees there. So it's winter.
It's winter for us. And so it's soup time. And so, putting it in every kind of soup, even just broth. Broth has been just, we have it all the time. If we don't make it ourselves, we go to a place that we really like their broth. We actually went last night to Bombas of Texcoco, and they were closed. We realized, they're closed.
Their broth is good.
Theirs is really good. And so, but Thai food. So we went to a Thai place, our new favorite Thai place. And so that's really easy to bring that home, already made, and put that in. But when I make Thai, because that's one of the things that, my kids ask every time they're home, when I go to you, I make Thai curry. And so those things that I'm normally eating like that, and really spicy, spicy foods, put it in that. Right. The other thing that I've put it in is the papaya salad. So the dried leaf is good because the dried leaf soaks up the juices and it adds a texture. It's a little bit, because green papaya has its own texture. It's more like chewy, right? And so
crunchy, but also kind of chewy and
mm-hmm. But then all those flavors, the sour and peanutty, right, and spicy. Yeah. So it's easy for moringa to be in there, and actually you can put a lot in there if you want. But Thai cooking, I think, is one that I really like because of that. But the pesto by far is our favorite thing in the summer. As soon as we have harvest, we're making pesto. So depending on where you are, but we can do it with the powder as well, and we also make pesto and freeze it. So that's right. Those are ways that we can have it throughout the year. And I had never done that, but Chris, my husband, had done that. And we're like, oh, we're out of pesto. So he said, oh, I froze some, and it tasted just good. He said, no, I
saved the day.
Yeah, he saved the day. So
I like that. Thai makes a lot of sense to me because, as you mentioned, spicy is a really, really great way to incorporate again because it doesn't mask it. Like, we're not trying to say that you have to like hide the flavor of moringa. It just needs a lot of care and attention and finesse when you talking about balancing it. Spice makes sense, but also the coconut. You mentioned the coconut, the mojo. Instantly, I started kind of salivating a little bit. The coconut, that sweetness, that richness, that butteriness. All of those nisses are really, really good. The tropical and tropical, they go together. They already are kind of married when it comes to the terroir of where and how they grow. So it makes a lot of sense. And that mouthfeel really coats your mouth nicely, which I think moringa strives on that as well, because there's a little bit of stringentness, which kind of strips oils off of your palate when you're eating. So having something rich, buttery is a really great way to think about it, which is why soup, the textural, that silky velvetyness is really key. That was great. Great episode. Way to kick off celebration of moringa from the culinary world. Next week's episode, you're going to be diving into a lot more of the nutrition, talking about some of the health benefits. I want to just pop this picture up because this always gets me. Some of the nutritional value of moringa is just through the roof. So think about some of this. Moringa leaf. I mean, it's ridiculous the amount of vitamin C and calcium and iron and potassium, all the things you think of with these ingredients you see on the screen now, bananas and milk and oranges, and it exceeds all of them in those nutritional values. So you're going to be talking about that a lot more next week, a little bit more of the research behind some of the gut health. You'll get me digging into that. And then look forward to some other episodes coming up. We'll have Mohana on again. We're going to dive into some of the projects of your students, especially out there in Southeast Asia with what's going on with Amit in India, Dhamma in Sri Lanka, with Mohana in Malaysia, and a lot happening in that part of the world with your students and their projects. So check that out over the next couple months.
Yeah, and when we're in India, Amit has said the traditional wedding foods, he's going to be putting moringa in. So we'll have some recipes. I'll come home with recipes from that. And in Sri Lanka, the same thing. We have already caterer, and she's going to just have them put moringa in all these different things. So I'll have recipes from Sri Lanka, and I'll be coming home with a suitcase of spices because I've made this.
So we already had the workings of Moringalicious too. The new book is just going to be your travels. Come on. No, that has to happen. That's the book. You and Dhamma and Mohana, like three of the gurus of moringa, traveling around India, Sri Lanka, and Malaysia, picking up recipes as you go and stories from those places and pictures of you in fields. Come on. That's a book.
Yeah, that's a lifetime.
Right? That's a book right there. And I know you're going to have some video content from that as well. All right, everyone, that's it for this episode. Again, use hashtag Moringa Food. Show us your moringa culinary journeys. We want to be a part of it. We want to be a part of what happens with the future of moringa, obviously, and the culinary side of that being 20 plus years where we have been committed to pesto, spice mixtures, and everything that has come since. That's it for this episode. Appreciate